Hey there, and welcome to yet another one of my cheesy YouTube videos. On this video, I am going to go over changing out the timing belt on a Volkswagen ALH TDI engine. And not only are we just going to change out the timing belt, we're going to discuss a few things that I think needs to be considered when making such a repair. Before we dive into the repair, I want to take a minute and do a shout out to CarQuest Auto Parts, which I think its official name is Auto Parts Company in Stephenville, Texas. In October of last year, I bought the timing belt kit for this engine. I just set it aside. I just wanted to get it. And when I went to put the belt on a couple days ago, lo and behold, all the parts were wrong. At first, I thought I got it from the internet. Then I thought to myself, no, because I would have got it from CarQuest, because CarQuest is who I go to when I want to make sure the parts are good quality parts. Anyways, I opened up the box. Every part in that box was for a Honda. And there was a little piece of paper in there saying it was for Honda Civic. I said, oh crap. So I called CarQuest and man, it's been a long time since I got this kit from you, but the parts are wrong. It's all Honda. So he said, give me the part number off the box. I gave him the part number off the box. He said, that part number is for a Volkswagen TDI. He then said he'd order a new one and for me to bring it in and exchange it. So when I went to the store to exchange it, he had a box exactly like the box I had with the exact same part number on it. He cut the box open and he pulled out Honda parts. So I'm like, holy shit, 7 months apart. And that box has got the wrong parts also. And he said, yeah, he said, the inventory list that it says is supposed to be in the box is not what's in that box. So it was totally messed up. So obviously the manufacturer, which was Dayco on the box, and nothing bad about Dayco because they make good stuff, they obviously had labeled a series of boxes wrong. And chances are these two boxes were boxed about the same time. One just sat in the warehouse for 7 months, longer than the other. I'd like to just give a big thank you to Auto Parts and helping me through this problem. So let's get started on the timing belt. I'm doing this job with the engine out of the car. It's usually done with the engine in the car, but since this engine's being swapped into a Mark I Volkswagen Rabbit pickup truck, I just thought I'd freshen up the timing belt before I put it back in. So if it was in the car, I'm not going to tell you everything you need to do because it's not in the car. You'll really just have to find a book to tell you the proper steps. Now, I'd like to take a moment out now and explain something that's very important. Most of you are on the internet looking for somebody to tell you how to do something, and you run a huge risk of being led down a dark, blind alley and then getting your ass beat once you get to the end and no one there to stand up for you. Buy service manuals for what you work on. The manufacturer knows how something is supposed to be done. An example is how someone on the internet sets top dead center on the crankshaft from the front pulley here instead of the flywheel and back. And being off just a little bit on this front pulley is being off a long ways on the crankshaft in the back. Another example is these bolts that hold the injection pump drive sprocket on. According to my service manual, these bolts are stretch bolts. And I can give you 40 years of examples where the service manual saved my ass or the lack of a service manual kicked my ass, because there's things in service manuals that you just can't dream up out of thin air. So these stretch bolts are a perfect example. You may not realize that, and using the bolt twice could very well cause it to break, which will then again cause you more problems. So let me just give a quick explanation about stretch bolts. The typical bolt is made to torque in the elastic range of the bolt. So the bolt has two ranges that we want to consider. The elastic range, that's a range where as you tighten it, the bolt's going to stretch, but when you let off, when you take the bolt back off, it will go back to its normal shape. So it's elastic. Stretch bolts are designed to go past the elastic range and into what they call the plastic range. And once you're in the plastic range, they stretch and they don't come back. What you normally do on a stretch bolt is you'll torque it to a specified torque within the elastic range. And then they'll usually have you continue with a degree gauge. Moving that bolt beyond the torque specification takes it into the plastic range and stretches it. So then if you put this bolt back in later on and you torque it to the torque, now you're even stretching it even further. Now you're compromising the bolt, and there's a good chance that bolt will break on you. Please follow this video all the way to the end to learn how everything I just told you about this engine and stretch bolts is wrong. Otherwise, go ahead on down that dark alley and I'll be beating the shit out of you. So please follow through the video and you'll see what I discovered. Okay, another thing I want to discuss is what we're trying to accomplish here on putting this timing belt on. Once the belt's on, we want the crankshaft pulley to be top dead center by the mark on the flywheel. We want the injection pump pinned to where it is timed. And this pulley right here on the camshaft is on a tapered fit with no keyway. So I haven't busted it loose yet. I've taken back the nut off. So when I was about to get ready to bust the pulley off of the camshaft and just leave it on here to where it'll spin, I am going to install the new belt. And by the way, the camshaft's being held in place on the back of the camshaft with a special tool. So we got the flywheel at top dead center, which means the piston's at the top of its stroke. Number one piston at the top of its stroke could be at top dead center of the compression stroke or top of the exhaust stroke. So what you would do is you would check the valves on number one cylinder and make sure the lobes are up, because just opposite of number one is number four. So number four is at the top, while number one's at the top dead center of the compression stroke, number four is at the top, at the end of its exhaust stroke. Number four cylinder's valves are transitioning from letting all the exhaust out as the piston goes up, and then that valve has just closed, and the intake valve is about to immediately open when the piston starts to move down and draws air in. So that's the difference. So we want to be at number one cylinder, we want to be at top dead center of the compression stroke. The camshaft has a cutout in the back of it that this tool right here has a flange that will set inside that cutout. Volkswagen is saying if there's any rock side to side on this plate, take a feeler gauge, take two feeler gauges actually, and make sure that you got the same amount underneath each side to take up the play. So if you used to force it to one side and you could get 10,000ths here, then centering it back up, you should be able to put 5 on this side and 5 on this side, and the play should be gone. That's how important it is to Volkswagen as far as setting up this engine for putting on the timing belt. Even if your camshaft is a little bit out of time from your crankshaft, that's going to affect the timing of the injector pump, which you see I've got the pin in. This is the gear. This is part of the gear. This inside here is a flange attached to the end of the injection pump shaft. This pin goes through the slot and it goes through a notch in the flange that's on the shaft, and then it goes into a hole in the case. So we'll have to pop the sprocket loose from the tapered fit, so then it'll free spin on here. I'm gonna bust the bolt loose for the camshaft sprocket. It's locked in and back. I don't want to just exert a pressure and hold it, so I'm just going to give it some hard wraps with another wrench, kind of like an impact would do. 18mm removes the bolt And they also recommend using a special tool to hold the sprocket in place. I think I'll drop a puller in here and try to pop it loose. I got the sprocket loose. The plastic here was already cracking and I cracked it even worse. Kind of go against my whole point of having it, the timing belt sealed up. I'll do something about it. My puller wasn't working worth a darn. My 2-drop puller kept slipping off. I went through with the punch, and since my plastic broke off anyways, I gave it a few good wraps right about here from the back side. Some people hit it higher up on the pulley. I don't like that idea. I'm afraid I could bend it. Pulleys are tapered fit, like I say, onto the shaft. Now it free spins. Once I get my water pump changed out, and these bearings changed out, my gear back on, my belt back on, this will give me leeway to get everything adjusted. And once I put my tension back on it, double check my timing marks, then tighten this bolt down to the specified torque. I seem to remember someone talking about using a Loctite on this tapered fit in here. Unless a book tells you to do it, don't. So that's my 2 cents on that. 16mm socket took this bolt out for this idler pulley. I've taken the 3 water pump mounting bolts out. I used a 10mm socket. They do have a hex in the middle, but I used the socket. I'll give a few wraps. All right. Really nothing wrong with that pump. I'll probably save it, and I don't know why. Guess for a rainy day. I'm cleaning my surface where my O-ring goes. You're supposed to use a little bit of coolant to lubricate the O-ring. These are supposed to torque at 11 foot-pounds. Not getting out the torque wrench for these. 11 foot-pounds would be proper. I'm just checking my impact, make sure it's drawn it down tight enough. I will look at the edge, make sure it looks like it's drawn down against it. Sure does. I'm always nervous putting something like this new water pump on here when my old water pump worked just fine. Because as you know, if we all been mechanicking on things, you know this. Sometimes you make a trip back to the auto parts store, returning something that was brand new because it was manufactured wrong. So why replace something that ain't broke? Just for preventative reasons, and hope that you got a good part in exchange. It's time to remove these rollers and put the new ones on. Looks like a 13. Hopefully you can hear these. I'm replacing both of these bearings because I don't like the way they sound, and I got a little bit of play in them. Make sure they're both the right part. Sure looks it. Feels a lot better. I'm gonna hit the threads with a little brake clean and the nut. The top one's a bolt. It's supposed to be torqued to 15 foot-pounds. The bottom one's a nut. It's supposed to be torqued to 16 foot-pounds. That jerk at the end wasn't good. Let's talk about using a torque wrench. This is a torsion wrench. It uses the twist of this shaft to determine how many foot-pounds you're putting at the end by reading the scale right here. As far as I know, they don't never go out of calibration. They could become damaged, so the needle could be off, and then you definitely want to compensate for that. Though it's a little one, this is a click type torque wrench. This is inch pounds. You're always supposed to store a torque wrench, you want to back off the adjuster all the way when you store it. You don't want to store it with a load on it. Been a long time since I was in the Air Force learning how to use these things properly. But I think it's the bottom 10% or even the bottom 20%, I don't remember. And the top 10 or 20% of the scale, you don't want to be using that part of the torque wrench. You want to use that middle percentage. Sorry, I don't remember the exact right amount, but just keep in mind, if it's a 30 to 150 torque wrench, you don't want to be torquing at 30. You'd want to get another torque wrench to suit your needs. They should be recalibrated regularly. If you drop it, you're supposed to recalibrate it. When you go to the automobile shop and get tires on your car, watch the guys running around with torque wrenches. Back when I was in a tire shop when I was in high school, we never used torque wrenches. But now they do, and it's pretty impressive, right? Until you realize they hammer them on with the impact, and then all they do is click. They'll go by and click, 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 and you won't see the torque wrench move. It won't go click. It'll go click. Well, all they know is the torque is somewhere above what they got the wrench set at. So it could be over-torqued. So they're not, from what I can see whenever I go to auto tire shops, they're not torquing your tires properly. They're hammering them on with the impact, and they're doing a song and dance with the torque wrench to make it look like they're really professional. Also, if they clunk it around on the floor, or if they put it in the toolbox at night without backing it off, they're just not, who knows what that torque wrench is really reading, because they probably damaged it. That's my spill on torque wrenches. All right, we got the rollers on, we got the pump on. I need to put this big roller back in and find you the torque for that. Clean my bolt up. From what I see, it's 30 foot-pounds. That's 30. It moved a little bit. I'm going to say it's good. Just for a record, this big one at the bottom, that's 88, but I haven't taken it off. Okay, I've got the belt on. I got to adjust my tensioner. You're supposed to turn it till this little notch right in here lines up with this nub or notch, whatever. It's not a notch, but you'll see it move. See that? And that's aligned right there. That's tensioned. So its torque is 15 foot-pounds. 15 foot-pounds. Oh, I switched nuts. Now I gotta go to 15 foot-pounds. I should be steadying this. I should be holding it like that. 15 foot-pounds. I switched this nut, and when I was digging through my tool bin just now, I found this one that seems to be a lock nut. I'll tell you a little secret. These bolts were loose when I took this engine out. It was sitting here on the table after doing other projects, and I went to turn them, and I'm like, holy shit, that's loose. Did I loosen them up already and just don't remember? You can see where this sprocket's done this number on them. You see where it slid, the pattern on there. That was my fault. I'm the last one to jack with this engine. Holy shit, I cannot believe I put it together and forgot to tighten something. Very embarrassing. But it ran a long time that way. Holy shit. Very embarrassing. Let me see what these torque to. Okay, I discovered a little bit of information. And it wasn't until I read into the service manual to the chapter on doing the electronic final adjustment on the injection pump. And it said there are two different types of bolts used. This bolt that I have has a flat top to it, and there's no cutout or skinny neck to it, or the shank is not skinny. This bolt is a regular bolt and can be retorqued multiple times. This is not a stretch bolt. The stretch bolt would have had a pointed end on it, and down here at the shank, it'd be a lot thinner. So it wasn't until I read that far into the book that I find that there's two different bolts used. So that's good, I can reuse these bolts. That's another reason why having a service manual is very important instead of relying off word of mouth. And even in this case, the chapter on the electronic final adjustment is quite a ways further into the book. And if I didn't just decide to go review it real quick, I would never saw that about the bolts. And I'd been assuming the bolts I had were stretch bolts all along. So it is so important to have the manual, and it's important to read it. So I hope that's what you get from me from this video. To do the final adjustment, which I've never done on this engine, and I've done the timing belt twice in its life, you would hook up a scan tool, which I don't know if my Autel diagnostic tool would work for this or not. And you'll start it and run it and take some readings and this, that, and the other. But then when it comes to do the physical adjustment, they'd have you loosen two of these up and remove the third. And then you would turn the center shaft. I think it said clockwise to advance and counterclockwise to retard. And then you'd bolt everything down. If these were stretch bolts, you torque them to that initial torque. They call it stage 1 at 15 again. Then you'd start the engine and check everything. But since these are not stretch bolts, you can go ahead and torque these. I have to check and see if there's a different torque. The non-stretch bolts torque to 18 foot-pounds. And then you would use your tool to check to see if you corrected everything. If not, then you'd loosen them again and advance it or retard it as necessary. And then once you get the timing where you're happy, then if they're stretch bolts, you'll torque them to the 15, then you'll turn them a quarter turn, stretching them. Okay, we want to check, make sure I'm still at top dead center on the crankshaft. And actually, I'm a hair off. Look at that. I am a hair off. I know some people don't care about hairs, but if I can put it on there, look at that. And that would have barely moved that front sprocket. My camshaft tool is still slid up in there where it belongs. Okay, I got to hold the camshaft sprocket. I torque it so that the tool on the back of the camshaft doesn't do the work. I'm using a crow's foot on the end of a breaker bar. This torque's at 33 foot-pounds. That should do it. I do own a click type torque wrench, but it's been so long since I used it. I know it's out of calibration. So that's tightened, that's tightened, these are tightened. Water pumps properly tightened, used antifreeze to lubricate the seal. Don't use Permatex. This is tightened. The idler, these are all tightened. And pull this out. Supposed to rotate it 2 revolutions and then recheck it. I'm going to just give me a better mark up front here, so I don't have to walk around back. And when I get it closer, I'll go double check my timing back. Well, that's the whole idea. That's why I'm rotating it, so I can check my timing. I need to find a socket to fit there. 3/4, 12 point, or 19. I've taken my rag off the top so I don't get all wadded up. Got some compression going on. That's a good sign. It's in the neighborhood. Timing mark is correct, and the cam tool sits in place. Perfect. In order to gain access to the back of the camshaft, you got to take this vacuum pump off. It's got a little drive that runs off the back of the camshaft. Go back and make sure that the tab for the tensioner is in a little square hole where it belongs. Well, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you got several things out of it that will be helpful to you. One is the need for service manuals. Number two is hopefully a little bit of explanation on torque wrenches and things like that. I pretty much in my videos I show you how I do things, my thought process on what's important and what's not, basically. And don't go by what I say, go by what the manual says. Anyways, I enjoy doing my videos, and I hope you share my videos. I hope you click the like button, and I hope you subscribe to my channels. And remember, if you love life and learning new things, go aimless.com.